Hi guys, thanks very much for coming today. It's an honour to be here. My name's Trevor Loudon from Christchurch, New Zealand. I've been touring this country for nearly 3 years now, speaking to over 300 groups. They give me 90-day visas to visit your country, but I'm very tempted to do 91 days because apparently I get a free cell phone and healthcare. What a great country. People always ask me why I care about the United States. I say there are two basic reasons. The first is gratitude. My country was only saved in World War II from invasion by the Japanese by the huge sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that memory is very strong in my country today. The second reason is related but a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom should fail in the United States, if you lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which are in grave danger, the bad guys of this planet, Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their Islamic allies, they're going to carve up this globe amongst themselves. And you see that happening right now. Your allies, folks, Israel, Germany, Britain, Canada, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, they're all freaking out right now. They're looking at your country and wondering whether it's worth being an ally of the United States. They're looking at your leadership and they freak out because they see that your leaders tend to love the bad guys of the world more than they love the good guys. And your allies, look what your president did to Poland and Czechoslovakia when he took office. One of the first things he did was to take away the missile shield protecting those countries from the Russians. Then he abandoned Georgia to the Russians. And now they're looking at the Ukraine, folks. The Ukraine is fighting for its freedom right now from Russian domination. They have a treaty signed in the United States Senate to protect them in the event of Russian military aggression. They gave up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for a promise of American protection. And now that they need it, where is it? The other day, Obama sent them $5 million of non-lethal aid and John Kerry. Which is more insulting, folks? The worst thing that John Kerry would ever do to the Russians is cut off their ketchup supplies. And Obama has put a few sanctions in to terrify Mr. Putin and his friends. I saw a rally in downtown Moscow the other day. A woman held up a sign that I thought summed up their attitude very well. The sign said, "Your porn is harder than your sanctions." Says it all, doesn't it? You got to look, folks, around this world. China is building a big blue water navy in the Pacific. Russia is trying to re-establish its empire in Europe. Iran is trying to dominate the Middle East. Iraq is dissolving into chaos. The world economy is teetering on the brink. North Korea and Iran are working together on EMP weapons. 6 atomic bombs fired into your upper atmosphere from a fishing trawler would basically fry your entire electrical grid in your country for years. Your own government has said that if that ever happens, 80% of Americans will be dead within a year. How serious does the world situation need to get, folks? Because you've got a president who's worked with pro-Soviet Marxists his entire life, who's abandoned Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength. He is empowering your enemies all over the world and alienating your allies. What happens, folks, when you lose your strength? What happens to your peace? Do you think any of this thing that's happening in Ukraine right now, or Iraq, or what the Chinese are doing would be happening if you had a Ronald Reagan in the White House? But it's happening now because you've got a guy who's basically working for the other side. The most significant thing your president said in his entire first term of office when he was caught off mic in South Korea with then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Yes, Mr. Medvedev, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. How much more blatant does it need to get, America? This isn't about a depression, folks. You can survive a depression. This isn't about losing some of your rights. You're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in the position before when your commander-in-chief is gutting your military before your eyes as your enemies get stronger and stronger? America's survival is at stake, folks. And it ain't just America. Because if America goes down, the entire Western world goes down. That's what's at stake right now. The front line for freedom is what happens in America right now, because what you do is going to determine the fate of the Western world. Now, my books, I have some of my books at my stand. My latest one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists and Progressives in the US Congress. And it is exactly what its title says. It exposes 51 members of the House and 14 senators who wouldn't get a basic security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither would your president, by the way. But the book is really about the two big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil. Because we all know that the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And what have the communists done in the last 20 years, folks? They don't exist, do they? Or if they are, they're no longer a threat. And who tells us this? Mainly the communists. The other big secret of modern communism, which is hardly ever discussed in all the thousands of books on the subject, it is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party, maybe only a few hundred comrades strong, to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. What I'm telling you, people, is less than 20,000 card-carrying Marxists in this country are writing the laws that control the lives of more than 300 million Americans. And the mechanism they use is very simple. It is control of the labour unions. You were very lucky in this country for a long time because your unions were controlled by hardcore anti-communist, patriotic Americans like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. But in 1995, there was a coup. A massive change took place, and I bet you never heard about it. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, took over the AFL-CIO. That gave them effective control of the Democratic Party. There's not a Democrat in this country, from county commission to federal level, who does not owe his job to the labour unions, folks. And if you control the unions, you control a Democratic Party. So the process is simple. The Marxists set a policy. It might be Obamacare, socialisation of student loans, green jobs, normalisation of relations with Cuba, a New START treaty with Russia. They set a policy. They make it union policy, and the unions make it Democrat policy. There's not a policy in today's Democratic Party that cannot be traced back directly to Democratic Socialists of America or the Communist Party USA, or both. They are calling the shots, folks. Now, I want to give an example of the big policy right now that is affecting every American that's completely from the Marxist agenda. That is comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty. Now, people, you have Republicans telling you that that amnesty will be good for the GOP. People like John McCain and John Boehner still hell-bent on passing this. They are telling you that if you give 12 or 14 or 16 or 20 million illegal immigrants citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful they'll all become staunch Republicans, right? How delusional can you get? The reality is very simple. These people will vote Democrat overwhelmingly. So why did these Republicans tell you this garbage? Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent more than $1.7 billion promoting amnesty in the last 10 years? What do you think the Chamber wants out of it, guys? Cheap labour to pluck their chickens and pick their watermelons. Because their profits, folks, are far more important than your border integrity or your national security or the laws of your land. That's right, isn't it? But the real driver of this is the hard left. This started out in California in the 1950s with a Communist Party member named Bert Corona. He's also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up a whole network of immigrants' rights support groups through the Southwest and Southern California. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, to get them work in the factories and farms, get them citizenship and voting. Now, this man, Corona, trained several hundred people to carry on his work for him. 3 of them are very prominent today in California. One of them is a man called Antonio Villagrosa, a hardcore Marxist, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. He turned LA into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in their hundreds of thousands, changed the entire demographics of the state. Another member of this group, Gil Cedillo, a Communist Party supporter, until recently the head of the California State Senate. Big-time immigration activist. He got the DREAM Act pushed through in California a couple of years ago, which gave all sorts of so-called rights to the children of undocumented workers. Third member of this group, Maria Elena Durazo, a Marxist, the most powerful woman in California, in my opinion. She is the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is the one behind the massive union-driven, union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that have added hundreds of thousands of Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 15 years, almost all of them Democrats. The work of these people has changed California from a reddish-purplish state to solidly blue, all a deliberate Marxist program. Now, the man who is leading this movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. You've seen him on TV, I guarantee, wearing a purple shirt, leading an immigration rally. Until recently, the executive vice president of the SEIU union. A member of Democratic Socialists of America, a supporter of the Communist Party USA. He was on Obama's Latino Advisory Committee and was personally consulted by Obama before Obama embarked on this latest push for amnesty. He also works very closely with Luis Gutierrez, the rep from Illinois, who's driving the immigration issue in the House. Gutierrez is a former member of the pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist Puerto Rican Socialist Party. Medina is the man who got the bill pushed through the Senate, and he's been using his union comrades around this country to pressure your Republican congressmen to flip their vote on immigration to get a bill through the House. Now, there may not be many here, any union members or former union members in the room? Here, 1 or 2. Okay, gentlemen, which organisation in this country 20 years ago was leading the charge against illegal immigration? Against. It was the unions, folks. The AFL-CIO, because they saw that illegal immigrants were unfair competition for union members and would drive wages and conditions down. Which organisation right now, today, in 2014 is leading the charge to legalise illegal immigrants. The unions, AFL-CIO and the SEIU. So why was it bad for union workers 20 years ago and good for union workers today? The fact is it isn't. Before 1995, the unions were there to represent the interests of their members. Since 1995, when they were taken over by Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party USA, they were there to promote socialist revolution. The revolution comes first, folks. The unions are deliberately selling out their own members right now because the revolution comes first. And it isn't easy to get union members to vote against their own interests. It took the Marxist Eliseo Medina 5 years of hardcore lobbying to get them to flip their policy from anti-illegal immigrant to pro-legal immigrant, which he achieved at Louisiana at their big national convention in 2000. So why does he want it, folks? Why is this man's life's work? Well, Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago. He got up in front of the comrades and said this: passing an immigration bill is the #1 priority of the progressive movement. We have to get citizenship and voting rights for our 11 million undocumented workers. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families or giving immigrants a break? Not a single word, folks. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we stand by these people and get them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand by our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but forever. Think about it, people. The last election was won by 2 million votes. 8 million more Democratic Party votes. What is the Republican plan for countering that, people? The first thing that happens is that Texas will go blue. And if you take the Electoral College votes from Texas, your second most populous state, and add them to the Electoral College votes from California, your most populous state, which they've already got through immigration, add them together, do the math. It is practically impossible for the Republicans to ever elect another president. Can't be done. It's a one-party state from that time, folks. And if you think the Democrats are arrogant now, what are they going to be like with 8 million more votes in their pocket and the Republicans permanently out of office? It won't be just the IRS they send after their enemies. This won't be like France or Germany, folks. This will be like Venezuela very quickly and Cuba not long after, because that is the plan. And you have Republicans, people, telling you this is good for the GOP. These are not stupid people. They can add up numbers. They know what 8 million means. I bet you they know how much is in their bank account. And they're still telling you this. They are not only betraying their own party, folks, they are betraying their country. Because amnesty is the death of America. And the only reason it hasn't passed is because of grassroots people like you terrifying the Republican hierarchy. It's the only reason it hasn't passed. You are saving America. Now, I just want to go into a slightly more positive note now. Probably depressed you enough. Look, this country right now, you think back in 1976, this country had been losing its freedom, Republican, Democrat for decades. But that year, a man came out of California who spoke of a shining city on the hill and liberty and the Constitution. And millions of people just like you rallied to Ronald Reagan, folks. And they pushed and pushed and pushed to get him that Republican nomination in 76. And what did the Republican old guard do, folks? Those Rockefeller Republicans of the day. They hated his guts. They pushed back. They sabotaged him. Ronald Reagan was banned from the state of Ohio that year by the Ohio State GOP. And they beat him. They gave the nomination to Gerald Ford, and Ford went up against Carter. How did the Carter years work for you guys? Interest rates up to here, gas queues round the corner, Panama, Iran. You're still suffering from those days, people. Your second worst ever president. But the important point is this: the grassroots did not give up. They got organised. They got organised and ready for 1980. They got into the GOP, took over the precinct positions, the township committees. And when Ronald Reagan ran again in 1980, this time they were not going to take no for an answer. This time they forced the GOP old guard to give them their candidate. Reagan got that nomination and took the country in a landslide, folks. The hostages were back the first day. The interest rates went down. The taxes went down. The economy boomed. He rebuilt your military. He rebuilt the pride in your country. He took out the Soviets without firing a shot. Was there any better president in the 20th century, people? And why did you have a Reagan revolution? Because people just like you stuck it to the Karl Roves and the John Boehners of the day, and you decided the candidate. Is there a message for today? Right, I'll get to that. Right now, folks, this country is Jimmy Carter on steroids. And you need Ronald Reagan on meth to turn this around, folks. Not just to go where Reagan did, to go way beyond Reagan, to actually gut your federal government and restore your constitution. But Reagan was a genius. He could unite the social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives, the defence conservatives. Got them all playing off the same songbook. But right now, your base is very fractured. You got 1 million libertarians who gave their vote to Gary Johnson last time. You got social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, Second Amendment voters, energy voters. You got 2 million GOPers who stayed home last time. You got several million evangelical Christians who are not even registered to vote. They alone could turn this country. And you have vote fraud to contend with now. You got the media against you. Can you afford to ignore any element of your base if you're going to win the next 2 elections and make that victory worth something? You need them all, people. How do you get them? Because I'll tell you straight, if the Republican old guard have their way and they give you a jeb, Common Core is great, illegal immigration is an act of love, Bush, what's going to happen to your base, folks? I'd say a lot of it will fracture and stay home, and the Democrats will win. And they'll get 8 million more Democrat voters, and your country's done. But if you have a real leader, and I can't pick him, but I'll name a name, someone who's ready to put up their fists for your constitution and your country, someone like a Ted Cruz, for instance, things could be very, very different. So this is what I would do if I was Ted Cruz or someone comparable. I'd want to get that Reagan coalition together now, way before the primaries. I'd want to announce early and run early, and this is what I would do. Because all of that base people, those people, a lot of them don't like each other very much. But one thing they all have in common, they all want something. Whether it's a better defence policy or lower taxes or whatever, everybody came into this movement over a single issue, I guarantee it. So what I'd do if I was Ted Cruz, I'd go to all of these groups now and say, I'm going to run, and I'm going to run early, and I'm going to take this country back. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put Alan West on my VP ticket right now. And then for you libertarians, I'm going to make Rand Paul Secretary of the Treasury, and he can do what he damn well wants to the Federal Reserve and the IRS. Carte blanche. Energy voters, Sarah Palin, Secretary of Energy. Drill, baby, drill. Drill in your backyard if you want to. Scott Walker, Secretary of Labour, right to work in every state. Mike Lee, Secretary of the Interior, return the federal lands to the states. John Bolton, Secretary of State, tell your enemies where to get off. Rebuild your alliances. Very important. Ambassador to the United Nations. No one. Dr. Ben Carson, Secretary of Health and Human Services. End the welfare culture. Attorney General, Trey Gowdy. Stick it to the vote frauders, reform the Justice Department. And for those Christians who don't care about politics, but they hate the state getting into their kids' heads, I'd say to them, we want to get rid of Common Core, we want to protect homeschooling. You vote for me, I'll make David Barton Secretary of Education. Fill your whole cabinet. Name your cabinet, run as a team. Would you rally to a team like that? Would it unify the base? Because everybody's getting something, right? Everyone's got someone to inspire them. What would the media do with that, folks? Right now, they can demonise Mitt Romney or Sarah Palin. You try demonising 20 Rottweilers who are all running as a team across this country who don't take any crap from anyone. What would they do with that, guys? There's a precedent for this. I've talked to, well, he's getting the message. Look, people, you have a precedent for this. Ronald Reagan named his cabinet in 76. But you have an even better precedent. You didn't just have a founding father, folks. You didn't just have George Washington. You had George Washington and Samuel Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry and Benjamin Franklin and James Madison. You had a whole team, people. And they had their egos and they had their conflicting agendas, but they put them aside for the good of the country. You run as a team now, people. Unify the base and you take this country back in a full frontal assault on the left. Can you do it? Yes. Thank you very much. God bless America.
Trevor Loudon, ladies and gentlemen. That's right.